Hello, fellow pilgrims. This video is part of the preparations for Project Pilgrimage 21, an international historical reenactment event which is going to take place from May 14th to 16th, 2021, and it's going to take place all over the world. I've seen lots of preparations going on, and I decided I would like to try and contribute something, and I will do this by making a tutorial about casting pewter badges. I don't claim to have the perfect technique for this. It is just my approach, how I do it, and I would like you to look at it as a source of inspiration for your own work. Here comes a little disclaimer. If you hurt yourself or you're getting ill while doing this, then I'm very sorry, but please be aware that you do this at your own risk. For your very first mold, I would recommend you to use soapstone. It is very soft, the grain is very fine, and you can cut it into pieces by just using an old saw, which is very convenient. Talking about soapstones, there is an important thing you need to know. There are places in the world where the stone layers which contain the soapstone are close to stone layers which contain asbestos. And as you know, asbestos can be very harmful if it gets into your respiratory system. There is plenty of soapstone on the market which is certified and where there is a guarantee that it doesn't contain asbestos. That doesn't mean you can abandon wearing a mask. Always make sure to wear a mask when you're working with stone, if you're polishing stone, or in general when you're working in an environment which is very dusty. It is actually best to use sandpaper which is made for wet use, because if you're using water or a lot of humidity, you're already binding a lot of the dust which is created. Also, I wouldn't use a wooden surface under the sandpaper, but a surface which is harder and which is more flat, like maybe marble or glass. Sanding your soapstone bits on a glass surface is actually quite easy. I go up to P600 is usually fine enough. You can test whether they fit together properly by cleaning the soapstone bits, making them wet, and putting them together. And once they become sticky, that indicates to you that they are ready for carving. You draw your pewter badge somewhere in the middle, in the center of your stone. I usually draw it on paper and then take some transparent paper and transfer it onto the stone. Also, please keep in mind, if you're writing something, it has to be mirrored, otherwise it's going to be wrong on the cast. And of course, also if it depends whether it's left or right, you have to mirror it in order to make it proper. A word about tools. You can basically use any kind of tools you come across in your household, as long as they help you to achieve the desired shape of your mold. For example, for a pilgrim staff, I used a broken drill to carve it, or the upper part of this spoon, for example, provided me with the desired curvature for the wooden beams of this St. Andrew's cross. I also fixed some needles into some pencil holders. They give you a lot of control, which is really handy. And apart from that, I don't actually have a historical display. If I would want to make one, I would probably just build my own tools from spare metal and fix some wooden handles to it. That would probably be the easiest way. When carving your mold, you shouldn't use that much energy. Take your time, take it slow, take some breaks in between, and keep working steadily but slowly and concentrated. When I start carving, I usually first I carve the funnel. You can use any also rough tools which you want to. This goes pretty fast, but it always has a certain risk of breaking. So I advise you to first make the funnel and then create your mold, because if you're finished with your mold and then you make the funnel and you destroy something or something breaks off, that would be a pity. It's difficult to get enough control over it. Will it turn out the way you want it? You maybe can just take some broken off spare parts and polish them too. And then you start carving your picture, the difficult part of your picture, on its own, so you can do like a little test. And once you're satisfied, then you can carve it back on your actual mold. A good way of testing whether your carving is correct is if you use dough or whatever kind of flexible method that you have. Clay is also possible if it's not too wet. Then you just push it onto the mold. You can lift it off again, and then you can see how well your mold is, or what's still missing. Also with ornaments, that's also possible. And then maybe you have to do some corrections, and then you go to the actual mold and do it there. And you can always keep checking on your mold and control the amount of detail that you're adding. Once you've made your mold, just keep in mind to remember to make some channels also, because keep in mind that once the metal is running down into your mold, the air which is down here needs to go somewhere. So you have to make some channels which will help preventing the batch from having bubbles inside. A very important thing which you should keep in mind is to make sure that the opening of the mold is wider than the bottom. For example, here and here, or here and here, because it easily can become narrow at the opening of the mold and wider down here at the bottom. Why? Because if you don't turn your mold and you keep working away and you go like this, then it stays narrow up here and it becomes wider down here because of the movement of your tool. If this happens, you won't be able to get your batch out of your mold once you're casting. Or let's say you will get one batch at the max by destroying your mold, which would be very, very troublesome. So always make sure that your mold is open, and you can even check this with your dough. If it doesn't get out properly and there's still some dough inside your mold, that would mean probably it's not wide enough at the opening up here. So then just go and make sure that really that it stays like this in order to get it out after the casting. Sometimes, like in this case here, it's actually better to make a cast, like a first cast, before you are adding too many details, just to have the ability to control the overall dimensions of your batch. And once it turns out nicely, you can add some more detail. Like in this case, it was the bark of the trees which was added afterwards. So what you do is you carve your mold. You control all the details, and then you start casting. And of course, you can also add some more detail while casting. Some of the archaeological finds, they have holes in at least two of the corners where you could fit some pins in, which would help keeping the mold together. That absolutely makes sense if you're producing dozens of badges. If you're just doing a couple, you can also just as well hold it with your hand, just put a piece of cloth around it, or take a thick glove and then you hold it like this. Casting your pewter badge might actually be the easiest part of the entire process. You'll need a proper spoon, like this one here, and you'll have to run a couple of tests to get the temperature right, and then you'll just start casting, and it's great fun. You'll be able to produce many batches from your molds. That was it. That was my first tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. I would be interested in learning your opinion about this. And we have a nice Facebook group running where we share our ideas, our experiences, our knowledge about historical pilgrims kits. And it would be great if you could join us there. Just follow the hashtag pilgrimage21 and also take a look at the website of the Company of St. George, where you can find further information about this project. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and bye bye.